Welcome, everybody, back to the 4-Star Podcast. Today, we have a very special guest who's a specialist in the cannabis industry. And we have Jay Czarkowsky. He's the founding partner of Canna Advisors. Jay, welcome to the 4-Star Podcast.
Thank you, Brian. It's great to be here this morning.
Excellent. Well, before we talk too much, I want everybody to know a little bit about you. So Jay is an influential cannabis entrepreneur, investor, and advocate for the industry, very well connected, operates out of Boulder, Colorado, which is known for being interested in those kinds of things. Founding partner of H2 Talent, a top-tier cannabis recruiting company, and Trailhead LLC that invests exclusively in cannabis companies. Now, you started your first dispensary and cultivation facility in Boulder called Boulder Kind Care. And Jay, you're also a founding member of the National Cannabis Industry Association, which is, again, quite interesting. And you mentioned to me that you're dedicated to building the industry through successful and inclusive state programs. And I guess you guys are operating in 31 states, which is pretty impressive. So is that pretty much the full story, Jay? Sounds like it to me.
Brian, you're taking me down memory lane. Yes, all those things that you said, I can confirm are indeed true. I get tired just thinking back on it.
Yeah,
we've been busy, and we opened our first dispensary in Colorado back in 2009, which was an interesting time. No rules, no regulations back then, and there were certainly no business licenses available.
And now it's heavily regulated and very different. So things have changed a lot, hasn't it?
Very much so. Lots of change for 12 years. Yes.
Well, so you've been at it for about 12 years and you've seen a lot. Now we're talking to investors here in the 4-Star Podcast. And so some of these investors might say, gee, I don't know enough about cannabis to be invested. So maybe we can talk about, what do first-time investors need to know before they jump in? And maybe there's some background that you could give us for them to make that kind of a decision.
Sure. And that's a great question. I think the easier part of the answer is that the cannabis industry is really no different than any other industry in terms of an investor's need to do due diligence before they get into any investment. And years ago, I used to tell, would-be cannabis investors really the same thing that I tell them today. Rule number one, the cannabis industry is not instant riches. And there is no guarantee of success for a cannabis business. Just because somebody may have a cannabis business license and is going to open up a grow operation or a dispensary, that person absolutely has no guarantee of success. Some folks will be wildly successful. Some folks and some companies will fail miserably, and there'll be a whole bunch of companies in between that do okay, maybe do fairly well, but you got to be careful, got to do due diligence. My philosophy is I always look at the team members and try to invest in the team.
Interesting. So how many companies do you own right now, or are you more of a consultant, or tell us a little bit more about the positioning and how the industry works?
Sure. So in terms of actual businesses that we run, Canna Advisors is my main day job. It's the mission of Canna Advisors really hasn't changed in 10 years since we started Canna Advisors. And that is to go out into new markets, partner with local folks in those states, and go after limited licenses. So we really are at our best when working in a state where the number of business licenses to cultivate it or to sell it, when those licenses are limited. So we get involved with local partners. These local partners pay us a fee, just like if we were a law firm. And we try to win these competitive licenses, and we do fairly well. We have a really good track record, and we try. Not always, we don't always get it, but we usually like to get a little bit of an equity position as a success fee upon success of winning the license. Right. And I think fast forward to 2022 now. I think we've been successful and have won over 200 competitive licenses over the last 9 to 10 years.
Interesting. So you've got little pieces of different companies and you consult with them and work with them throughout the industry.
We do. Unfortunately, at this point in 2022, I have help. It's not just me. I have 20 extremely talented people behind me at the Canna Advisors offices in Boulder, Colorado.
That's a big operation for cannabis. I know that. So you must be doing a lot of good work. So how is the industry? What is the state of the industry now, Jay?
So the state of the industry, it continues to grow. I don't think any one thing has happened over the last 5 to 10 years that has caused it to explode by leaps and bounds. I know we're all waiting for some semblance of federal legalization, even federal approval to help fix the 280E tax issue, to help fix the banking issues. But the industry continues to chug on, state by state, local municipality by local municipality. Laws are changing, attitudes are changing in the industry. It continues to grow. If I had to put a number out there, I would, and this should give people hope, certainly that haven't yet jumped into the cannabis industry. This industry is still very much in its infancy. If I had to say, what is this industry compared to what it's going to be when it's mature federally one day, we're probably maybe 5 to 7% of what this industry will be one day. So still in its infancy. First game of the series, lots and lots of room for upside still in the years ahead.
So when we visited with the cannabis attorneys, they were talking a lot about regulation and things that could happen that would be a positive. And one of the things they mentioned had to do with legalization and banking. What do you think about that, Jay? I mean, if the federal government finally allows federal banks to house cannabis money, how would that change the industry?
Banking's kind of a sore spot with me because when I had my first dispensary back in 2009, I think it was 2010 that US Bank not only shut down my cannabis business accounts, they also closed our personal accounts, including the savings account of my then 4-year-old daughter.
Oh.
So banking's always been tough in the cannabis space. And listen, it's not just me. Thousands of my associates over the years have had to go through that and have had their accounts shut down. So that's gotten better. The theme out there that cannabis businesses can't get bank accounts really isn't true anymore. I mean, it's still hard, and there's still plenty of them that do not have access to banking. But especially local banks and state banks in states where cannabis is legal have gotten much better about allowing for basic banking services. Now, if we had some semblance of federal legalization and some of the larger banks felt more comfortable offering the full breadth of banking services to cannabis businesses, how would that change things? Well, in addition to bank accounts, access to credit, access to loans. Right now the majority of financing in the cannabis space, certainly probably 99.999% of it, comes from private offices, private equity firms. Right. So access to more mainstream financing, I think, will be a big win for the industry one day.
Yeah, I know it's mostly been state banks and other institutions, but there's a prohibition happened as well, and it took a little while to get that back on track. So I guess this isn't a surprise, is it? Probably not.
No, I guess not.
Yeah. So the other was the regulatory side. States have approved recreational use. Some are still medical use. And you guys operate in 31 states now. What's your view of that? Like, how many states still don't recognize recreational use, and what's that landscape look like?
Yeah, we were doing the math the other day. Really, we were trying to determine, because there's always been a running bet in my office, what's going to be the last state in the country to have some form of medical or adult use like legalization. I think my wife bet on Kansas, but they're talking about it right now, and I think I bet on Wyoming. So we'll see. I think we're running neck and neck right now. But in terms of states that really don't have any type of program whatsoever, I think we're maybe down to 3. The adult use state count, I'm not really sure. It might be 12 or 14 right now, or 15. But the reality is, let's take states that have adult use programs like New York and New Jersey. the population of those two states it's a little over 30 million people. So that's 75% of California. So that's a lot of people. So there's two big states with adult use programs, but there's nothing built there yet. I think New Jersey has a total of maybe 7 open dispensaries right now. New York State may have, 30 or 40. So there's still a ton of room for not just hundreds, but thousands of businesses to develop in those states.
Yeah. So New York, New Jersey are kind of slow to adapt and adopt this, aren't they?
And it always takes time. They are slow, but they're really no more slower than other states. One thing to mention or to keep in mind is just because a state passes a law, it might still take a year or more for an application process to roll out, and then an additional year or 2 or 3 for these businesses to build out, to open up, get up and running. So definitely does not happen overnight. Yeah.
Interesting. What other states do you think will open here in the near term?
Well, I am excited about Kansas, mostly because it is right next door to Colorado.
Right.
They have nothing right now, not medical, not adult use. It seems like the Democrats and the Republicans in Kansas are almost, fighting right now to see who could be, first to put forth a winning initiative. And in terms of larger states, let's talk about Texas, right? Certainly one of the most populous states in the union. And all they allow for right now, I think, is CBD. And I think they just allowed for cannabis products up to 1% THC.
Right.
That's not very much. So there's still a lot of places with a lot of upside. Alabama, believe it or not, is going to be putting forth an application this year for medical marijuana grow operations and dispensaries. There won't be that many licenses, but hats off to a state in the deep South for moving that program forward.
Fascinating. Well, it's the states do rule their roost, so unless it's a federal market or federally authorized, it's gonna happen in this kind of herky-jerky fashion. But that's also a great opportunity for a good consultant like yourself to help companies through that and try to figure out how to make it work. And yeah, I know there are some sayings that you frequently use that are known as JISMs. Is that right?
Now you're really catching me off guard. Okay, that is true. There are JISMs out there.
Okay. Well, tell us your favorite JISM about the cannabis industry.
Well, we try not to get too full of ourselves or take ourselves too seriously. One of the things that we like to say is, it's work. No matter how successful we were yesterday in the last state, we just killed it and won a bunch of licenses. The work's not over. We have to get up the next day and put forth our best efforts in the next state. So we're always talking about I'm always talking about to my team how this industry is not going to build itself. Marijuana is not going to legalize itself. We got to get to work and get out there and continue swinging and making it happen every day.
Absolutely. Well, and there's so many ways to invest. We were talking earlier about the CBD oils and non-hallucinogenic forms. You can grow it, cultivate it, package and sell, retail. We have investors in the infrastructure business where they make warehouses for internal, growing inside, big trays, all the facilities that go with it. What do you think for an investor, all things being equal and in an appropriate level for that investor? Where are some of the best opportunities for an individual investor in cannabis?
Sure. So are we talking about the supply side, like what I like to say, picks and shovels?
Absolutely.
So, lots of opportunities on the supply side. And if we're just, talking about, true supply side, there's, companies that are beginning to form that are beginning to get traction that are, really out there, just to do, B2B supply, business to business, facility engineering work and construction and that kind of thing. One company that comes to mind just because they're public and anybody could, buy their stock now is Urban Grow.
Okay.
Urban Grow is, sort of as a small company actually here in Colorado. And, they were, plodding along, doing good work. I think they achieved profitability in the last year or two. They were trading on, the OTC. And then one day it was announced that they had been working with an investment bank. They raised $50 some odd million, and they uplisted to NASDAQ. The last report I just read from them not too long ago, I think their annual revenues is up to $50 some odd million now.
Wow.
And again, they sell the lights, they sell the nutrients, fertigation systems, but they also add additional value in terms of design work and implementation to help folks get up and running. They're working internationally now. They're also working outside of cannabis in the food industry, and I think we're going to see many more companies like that grow and become successful.
Interesting. Well, and I know we talked about earlier how there was a big flurry of activity about 3-4 years ago, where lots of companies were coming public, primarily on the Canadian exchanges. And then a lot of investors got in, stocks were running, and all of a sudden we had kind of a slowdown. And then the pandemic slowed things down a little bit as well. It just got complicated. Stocks started to tail off, and now many of them are at 40 to 50% of their previous highs. So now we have an environment where investors are wearing losses in their cannabis stocks. So is that an opportunity, or is that just kind of a mess?
No, I think for some stocks it is most certainly absolutely an opportunity. Well, let's face it. Let's go back to when all of these companies began to go public. Being a cannabis industry insider, for me, it was kind of a joke back then, because there were these companies that literally had nothing, no assets, very weak teams, bad backgrounds and track records, but they were going public. They were the next public cannabis company. And 3 to 4 years later, many of them haven't done anything. Many of them have gone backwards. I mean, mm-hmm. I'll use the MedMen as an example. I was always very suspicious of them to begin with. They were coming out swinging, raising hundreds of millions of dollars, and their stock today is probably 5% of what it was 2, 3, 4 years ago, back when things were booming. Just an example of very, very, very bad management, very, very bad financial management. A lot of that has happened. A lot of it hopefully has washed out and will continue to wash out. But for the better companies, there's definitely opportunities to buy low.
And there could be a consolidation too of some of those companies. If their management isn't as good, maybe the better companies will buy the weaker companies and reorganize them or whatever.
Yeah, and that's happening. That's going on, and it certainly, I think, will continue to happen. Consolidation.
Yeah. So, Jay, we talked earlier. Obviously, everybody in the cannabis business is new to it, as it's a new business. And your business prior to this was real estate and tech, and then, of course, the 2008 crash happened. It affected everybody. Tell us a little bit about that, and then how you decided to get into cannabis. What the metrics are that made you so interested.
Sure. So it's funny, but my wife says it best whenever people ask us, how did you get into cannabis? My wife, Diane Czarkowsky, always responds, it was a series of unfortunate circumstances that led us into cannabis. Yeah. So we were developing real estate, back, 2002, probably through, 2000, really through 2010, when we finished our last project. Began to build multifamily developments in Denver, transitioned to building very high-end, expensive luxury homes in the ski resorts of Colorado. Well, those markets, the high-end markets at the ski resorts, they were hit pretty hard after what I call the Great Depression of 2008. Values up there were cut in half, so we got hit pretty hard. We were in the process of losing everything. So it was 2009 when I had to put my little office building that I had downtown Boulder, Colorado, up for lease. I just couldn't really afford to keep it anymore. I had to lay my folks off. And we got approached by groups of young people. They all had cash. And one group was very excited about the space, said it would be perfect for their business. They wanted to offer, they offered us 3 months cash up front. Then the next group came along and they offered us 6 months cash up front.
Wow.
And I asked them, what are you guys up to? He said, well, sir, we're going to open a medical marijuana dispensary. You don't say. So I looked into it, looked into some of the legalities, and the reality was back then, Colorado had a program on the books since the year 2000. So they had a program on the books for 9 years. Never went anywhere because it was a very simple program. If you were sick, you can go to a doctor and get a medical marijuana prescription. It allowed you to grow 6 plants. That's it. If you couldn't grow your 6 plants, you could assign those plants to a caregiver. And this caregiver could grow your plants. But there were limits on being a caregiver. You could only have 5 patients, which means as a caregiver, you can only grow 30 plants. So that's all we had to begin with back then. There were no business licenses. There were no rules and regulation for a business. So you really had to be a risk taker, really had to be a cowboy and a true pioneer. And that's kind of how I am at the end of the day. So we jumped in, opened the dispensary, built not 1 but 4 grow operations, and we were crushing it in the early days. And our model was we just had every one of our employees set up as a quote unquote caregiver, and then that employee could have 5 patients assigned to him or her. Then we began to work with the doctors. Well, could we have a prescription for more than 6 plants? Oh, you think we could do 50 plants per patient? Okay. So that's kind of how we played the game back then. And then what really helped was the state of Colorado, rather than just saying, we're going to shut this whole thing down, they remained open to it and they embraced it somewhat. And they began to work with these very early, pioneering businesses. They worked with us to, can we develop some regulation? Can we develop a licensing scheme? So it was early, it was exciting, it was fun, but that's how the whole thing started.
That's great.
We never had any intention of becoming consultants, but we got approached by a group of folks in Connecticut in 2012, and they asked us if we could help them do the same thing. They had a licensing scheme. We helped these folks win a license. They were successful. They had an exit, 5 years later to GTI, and that's what kicked the whole consulting thing off back then.
So there wasn't much knowledge of the industry, but then your 4 or 5 years at that point made you very knowledgeable, and then you became consultants as well.
It did. There, especially when we started, my gosh, there was really nobody to call for help, right? We got introduced to a black market, grower, a drug dealer basically in town who knew how to grow some plants, and I think we offered him 15% of the company initially to help us get started. He quit after 2 weeks because having a job wasn't really his thing. Yeah, working. Yeah. But I used to tell people in the early days that nobody could have known less than I did when I got into this industry. In fact, I'll share this with you in the audience because it's kind of a funny story looking back on it. I took my first crop, my very first cannabis harvest, I took it to the dump. The whole thing, bagged in 50-gallon trash bags, dropped off the dump. It was that bad. Oh boy. But we learned from it, right? The next crop was much better. But then you look at your experiences, and then you start advising other companies. And are there some basic principles that you would follow in the cannabis industry? And are they basically the same principles as in most entrepreneurs? I think so. I think the principles are the same as in a lot of other industries, really. When starting a new cannabis business in a new state, the first thing is you have to have local support, right? I don't think it really matters what the state law is, but if a certain town doesn't want you, you're not going to do business there, right? They'll zone you out. They won't give you a building permit. Death by 1,000 cuts. So you got to play nice with the folk, with your neighbors who are going to be doing business. And local authorities and state authorities, they want to see the team. They want to see that the team could execute. They want to see that the team could run a compliant business. They want to see that the team has the capital available to execute on the vision. I don't think that's any different than opening a restaurant or any other business for that matter. So it turns out the same basic business ideas apply to pretty much every. I think so. So Jay, now after this discussion, get a better sense of where you guys are, what you do. What do you think the biggest opportunity is out there? Is it in cultivation? Is it in just being a dispassionate investor, or
or do you jump in and become a grower? What's the best way to get involved?
There's a lot of opportunities. I could share with you this, knowing what I know and having done what I've done in this industry over 12 years, as much as I like the idea of having my own grow operations again, no, it's a lot of work. It's a lot of risk. It's a lot of headache.
I'll bet it is.
For me personally, because of my relationships, I think getting involved in mergers and acquisitions is probably going to make a lot of sense in the years ahead. For somebody that might not have a lot of experience in cannabis, maybe just wants to be an investor. I think there's opportunities now with a lot of companies just because their stock values are so depressed. There's some really, really good companies out there. I'll use Cresco as an example. I'm a big fan of Cresco. Their stock is close to what it was when they had a pre-IPO private placement years ago. And there's a lot of them in that position. I think interstate commerce is going to be a massive, massive opportunity one day.
Right.
And everybody seems to be waiting for, some type of federal legalization to happen before they jump into that. My sense, I'll put this out there, I think we're going to start seeing some very, very limited interstate commerce happen by the end of 2022. And the way that'll happen, there'll be state authorities that allow their state businesses to export, and there'll be other state authorities that give the okay for their state businesses to import. And I think we'll see. I think we'll see people becoming tired of waiting for the federal government to act. And just like these states began to allow for cultivation and sale and everything else, I think we'll see some states this year allowing for interstate commerce.
Interesting. So it isn't played out. There's lots of opportunity in various levels, isn't there?
Oh, tons. I'll get back to the Northeast again. So if you put together the population of just Pennsylvania, New Jersey, and New York, and if you added in, Maryland, Connecticut, and Massachusetts, basically the Northeast, that's more people than the entire West Coast. That's more people than California, Washington, Oregon combined. And there's really, hardly any industry out there right now. California, right, does billions and billions of dollars in sales. A lot of California cannabis is exported to the Northeast. So just because of the financial expertise that exists in the Northeast, the marketing expertise, branding expertise, and everything else, all that creativity and intellect, I think we'll see the Northeast establish itself as the cannabis industry leader across the United States and hopefully globally one day as well. And that's why we really need some type of federal legalization, because the U.S. should be exporting globally. It's legal in Canada. These Canadian companies are able to export legally. That frustrates me sometimes. This is an American industry. I think we should be the global leader in this. Yes.
Well, maybe we will over time. This has been a fascinating discussion. I think the key, and obviously wealthy accredited investors make all the proper checks that they have to when they invest in private partnerships and angel investments and other things surrounding the cannabis industry, and all the people that invest in securities. Please check with your financial advisor to make sure that it's an appropriate investment for you and part of a diversified portfolio and such. But at the end of the day, I feel positive that there's still some opportunity for the right investors, the right people with the right time frame in their mind. And this is going to continue to be an emerging opportunity for investors.
Definitely.
Yeah. Well, great. Well, Jay, what other founding or final thoughts would you like to leave with our listeners here today about cannabis and investing in this whole experience?
No, I think I'll just mention again that we're still in the first game of the series here. Yeah. I'll say again that this industry is still in its infancy, and there is still a lot of opportunity. I'm not saying it's gonna be handed to you, right? But those that want to get out there, put in the time and the work and do the research and figure out, how to make it happen. There is still enormous opportunity in many areas for somebody to form a new business and not just do very well for themselves, but really change the futures of their families and kids and grandkids, and really, build multi-generational wealth. Those opportunities are still out there, and they're still up for grabs.
So this is a 9-inning game. Maybe we're in the second inning, right?
I don't even know if we're in the second inning. I think we're in the first game of the series.
Okay.
First game of the season. First couple of games of the season.
Yeah. So lots of opportunity out there, and we're excited. Well, we're really honored, Jay, to have you on the podcast today. Jay is one of the key senior advisors in the industry, working in 31 states, involved in all the industry associations, compliance groups, and whatnot. So you really do have a wealth of experience to share with us. And maybe we can check in with you again, later in the year and see how things are developing, and see if we can learn more later on, Jay.
It would be great. It's been fun being on with you.
Thank you. Thanks for being with us today on the 4-Star Podcast. We appreciate it. And thanks everybody for listening. All right. Take care.